Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Families Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Dan Cohen. I will be chairing today's meeting, like a quiz show host. This meeting is being broadcast on the Council's website so that any members of the public who are not able to observe in person can still observe remotely, and sincere apologies that we began 10 minutes late. Can you imagine if the news at 10 did that? There'd be an international outcry. Anyway, apologies for that. It would be very helpful if everybody could introduce themselves. And could I remind you to mute your microphone once you have introduced yourself? And just to mix things up, I shall start to the right this week.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Good afternoon, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adler Wharfdale Ward. I'm standing in for Amanda Carter.
Hello, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood.
Hello, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley and Eden Ward.
Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Hello, Kate Blacker, co-opted member.
Phil Evans, Chief Officer for Partnerships and Transformation in the Children's and Families Directorate.
Hello everybody, Dan Barton, Deputy Director for Learning in Children and Families.
Good afternoon everybody, I'm Julie Longworth and I'm Director of Children and Families.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor, Deputy Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Fiona Venner, I'm the Executive Board Member for Children's Social Care and Health Partnerships.
Hi, my name is Jules Hesselwood. I'm Councillor for Wheatwood Ward.
Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Nkela Maneka for Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill.
Good afternoon, Councillor Bromley for Horsforth and Rawdon.
Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Martin, Councillor for Round Haywood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Caroline Gruen and I represent Bramley and Stanningley.
Good afternoon, Andrew Graham representing the Church of England Diocese.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Karen Renshaw representing Alsea and Robin Hood Ward.
Good afternoon, Tony Brinton representing the Roman Catholic Diocese of Leeds.
Afternoon everyone, Councillor Andy Rowntree representing Kirkstall. I'm here today as a substitute for Councillor Bowden.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards, representing Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Bellamy and I'm the school staff representative.
And I'm still Councillor Dan Cohen. Thank you, everybody. Before we move into the substantial body of the meeting, I am very much aware, obviously, that our next meeting will be after the May election, which means there will be one or two people retiring from this board. Jackie Ward has sat on this panel for some 14 years. And if that doesn't need a long service medal, I don't know what does. And want to just formally minute sincere thanks to Jackie for many years of service to this board and to the young people of Leeds by extension of that. Someone else stepping down is Councillor Caroline Gruen. Obviously, we all get on really as councillors, but speaking as a Conservative member, you know, Caroline is one of the Labour members who I've always had the highest admiration, respect for. I would say there are councillors and there are councillors, and Caroline has always done for me two bits of work that just are that are on another level. The first is the scene. Her work in planning, your work in planning, Caroline, is in the very physical where we can see decisions are made. We shape the environment around us, and your work in planning is legend and your contribution to plans panels well noted, and you will walk around the city over years and see things that we've done through various plans panels. But your work with young people, particularly through this board and as a corporate parent, that doesn't get seen. It has a huge impact on young people right across the city. On a daily basis, there are young people who are better off because of the work that you have been involved in. And we can't see it. But I hope with the many years of a very long, happy and healthy retirement, you will take great comfort in the knowledge that there will be young people, in some cases who are alive, in some cases who are thriving in a way that they otherwise wouldn't, because of what you have done while you have been a councillor. And I don't think I can think of a better testimony that we leave young people in a better place because of what we've done while we've been here. And you absolutely have done that. And I take my hat off to you and wish you a very happy and healthy retirement. We shall miss you greatly. Your measured thoughts on everything we deal with, the way you cut through and just get to the real detail are things we can all learn from. And I know there are members of this board who you've subconsciously mentored, and I include myself in that in many ways, and who are the better also for having had you as a councillor in the city. I know Councillor Venner also wants to say a few words, so I'll bring her in right now.
Thank you, Chair. Caroline, I hope this doesn't embarrass you too much, because I've also said in Corporate Parenting Board how much I will miss you. But I've really appreciated your support all the years that I've been in this role, both as a corporate parent and on this board, and the diligence and passion with which you've fulfilled your duties and your forensic attention to detail. I don't think anyone who's ever in a meeting with you would have any doubt that you've not only read the papers incredibly thoroughly, but also clearly thought through what you want to say, what you want to challenge on. And I've really appreciated the support that you've given me, but also the challenge. And I think one of the things I've most enjoyed about working with you is I think it's really obvious how much you like being with children. And so when we've done things like youth summits together, it's just been such a joy because you're so clearly in your element and so enjoy engaging with children directly and hearing their voices. So yeah, we will really miss you, and thank you for all your support on both this board and on corporate parenting, and as a kind of nearby colleague as well. Obviously our wards border each other, so yeah, good luck for the next chapter, and we will really miss you, especially in children's services. Thank you.
I wouldn't dream of trying to stop you.
Well, those words are quite overwhelming, and I can tell that both the chair and Fiona, you've really thought through what you wanted to say, and you've said it so genuinely and passionately. I'm quite overwhelmed, actually, by what you've said. I feel very strongly that because this is my last scrutiny meeting for children, that it won't be my last contact with the world of children, because children have been my life. And I've been really supported by this group. I have found this group to be really cooperative, very professional, and very supportive of me, and very tolerant of me, because I've gone on a bit at times, haven't I, from this seat. But it's been a pleasure to work with you, and it definitely does mark the end of an era. So thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate them.
Thank you. Rob, can you take us through the first few bits?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A bit of a hard act to follow, but I'll run through the procedural items at the start of the agenda. Item 1, Chair, is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, and there have been no appeals against that. Item 2 is items for exclusion from the public, and there are no items to be excluded. Item 3 is the late items of business, Chair, and there are no late items. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will, under the Leeds City Council Code of Conduct, I will pause briefly to allow members to highlight any. I'll take silence as none. Okay, thank you, Chair. And then 5 is apologies, some of which have already been touched on, but Councillor Flynn is attending as a substitute for Councillor Amanda Carter. Councillor Rowntree is attending as for Councillor Bowden, and we also have apologies from Mr Anas Kittu, Jackie Ward, Laura Whittaker and Councillor Senior. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And can I thank those members who are substituting for other members? Thank you very much. It takes us then to item 6, which are the minutes. As usual, I shall go through page by page, starting at page 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and finally 14. Happy to approve those as a correct record of the meeting. Thank you. Thank you for someone. Thank you. I was met with stony silence. I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. Right. Thank you. Item 7 then. Inquiry report, provision of EHCP supports. First of all, thank you everybody for all the work done on this. So obviously at the last meeting, we had the report presented. We made some comments, some amends. Rob then circulated those. Not heard anything subsequent to that from any members. Councillor Pratt, anything you want to speak to on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the board is well versed in a lot of the issues around EHCPs. We've been doing a lot of work ourselves as a directorate as well to ensure that we're clearing the backlog as well as getting on top of the future reading of those. There is one pertinent point which has arisen since the last meeting. After you'll all know that there is an ongoing issue where a child with SEND in Leeds is funded less than a child with SEND elsewhere in the UK. It's something I have written to every Secretary of State for Education and most recently the Chancellor about this. In the report here under section 2 funding, I know that the board does acknowledge the funding issues around EHCPs. The reply I got for the letter of the Chancellor has clarified that the decision for Leeds to be funded less per child is a decision. It's not an accident. It's not a fluke. It's the system is designed in that way. And I think that's a really pertinent point. I know the board has agreed to lobby the government on this, and I do think it's a really pertinent point that it's been a decision of government to fund Leeds children less rather than an accident. I appreciate the chair doesn't want to get too much into political discussion. I've sent a copy of this letter to the chair, which I hope will be circulated, I presume, after the local elections. But I do think it's a really important point which needs to be on the record. And while we're asking the government to resolve this, we need to acknowledge it's a decision on their part rather than an accidental point. Beyond that, I think the board are well versed in every other element, and I'm more than happy to answer questions on any aspect today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the intention will be to circulate it after the meeting. It's just we can't have a detailed discussion on the wider points, but it is a fact. What they say is a fact. So I'd like to think we're all on fairly one view of that particular decision, frankly. Comments, questions, fundamentally on the report itself. We will reflect just to in the letter that Councillor Heselwood made the sensible suggestion that we will write as a board to government, and we will make sure that we express our view on that decision and hope that the decision can be revisited and reversed. Okay, and what we'll try and do is get, as soon as we've got that draft in a finished form, we'll circulate that so that it can be approved. I wouldn't want to send a letter from the board without the members of the board agreeing with that letter. Yeah? Okay. So questions, comments, observations on the actual report. I make no bones. I would like that we be able to approve it, so that so it's there in finished form, to be got underway and worked on, and then we can be monitoring progress rather than finalising our recommendations. But board, it's your report. So over to you. Comments, questions, observations. Thank you. So on that bit, yeah.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm conscious that I'm a substitute on this board, and my apologies if you've covered all of this in previous meetings. I'm sure you have. I used to be on the scrutiny board some time ago, and spoken to Steve Walker, Salim, and Julie, and they've got numerous occasions about EHCPs. And looking at the recommendations, no problem at all with them. But I just wanted to sort of emphasize that in future work on this that the board is doing, I do hope that there will be a lot of input from the families who are, receiving sort of assistance or waiting for help with the plans, etc. I noticed that there are a number of recommendations, one of which includes the patients, the parent carer forum. My heart sunk when I saw a digital app, in the sense that not everybody is as switched on as a lot of people in this room are in terms of that. And I just hope that we as a board, you do take into account everybody whose child or children are subject of an educational health and care plan in the future. That really all it was, Dan. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Actually, one of the things that the board asked to look at was actually making sure we bring that parent carer voice to this panel, so that we have a parent carer actually as part of our panel, which very much, Councillor Flynn, goes to the heart of what you were saying, actually, to make sure we capture that voice. It's so important. Councillor Gruen.
I was going to say something to Councillor Flynn very similar to what you've just said, actually, Chair, in that capturing the voice of the parent and carer association or panel was a very important part of the inquiry, and I became quite emotional. Actually, they've been here twice, or they've been represented here twice, and they left us in no doubt whatsoever that we have to improve in this area, and that they felt they were disadvantaged by the process. And I agree with all of the recommendations on the report, so I'm not asking for it to be changed, Chair, but I just want to hang a thought, a reflection in our minds as we move on with developing the recommendations in the report. And that is what came over from the families when they were here, or the parents, was that they cared deeply, of course they did, about their child or children. And that care never stops going, and it is always there, and it follows the thread of what happens all the way through. And I think these recommendations will help the local authority to do better, but it does need somebody who cares that these processes are followed through sequentially in the order that they're meant to be carried out, so that these things do happen, that you don't lose sight in that process. There's references in the report to being overly process driven, and it needs a person or people to keep an eye on this, like a parent would, but from the officer's side, in my view. Just thought I'd hang that in the air for consideration, Chair.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's a really, really helpful comment. I think going, I suppose, prior to the scrutiny inquiry, and I suppose prior to us engaging with PwC as a directorate, that was driven. I suppose myself coming into post as Director of Children and Families, the feedback that we had received, that I had received personally from children and young people, from parents, from carers, but also from partners, across the city, who were really saying we've got an issue. The system nationally is broken, but we've got particular, individual issues in Leeds. So really, I suppose I want to make it clear that the decision that we made within the directorate to undertake the root and branch review of our EHCP process from end to end was driven by that feedback, by the voice of children and families in the city. I'm confident, I think the board is confident that we've seen that continue, both through the work with PwC, but both through the scrutiny inquiry. And there's something for me, I suppose, about how that continues and our absolute commitment to ensuring that that does continue, but it's about the impact. It's about the so what, so we can listen and we can have parents and carers around this table and in other settings. But for me, it's incumbent on me and officers within the local authority to be meeting constantly with parents and carers. I know that Dan's met with the Parent Carer Forum. I was due to meet with partners from the Parent Carer Forum, and we've had to reschedule that meeting at their request. But for me, the important thing is the so what, is us going back to them and saying, you said X and we have done Y, and what difference has that made, to you and your family and your children, because that's what we need to be measured against, and it's about service development and it's about service delivery. It's about the future for children in this city. So I welcome the comment, and I'm absolutely committed to making sure that that is that's the direction of travel.
Thank you. I just wanted to really quickly echo. I know that Julie and I are in the same team and will absolutely agree, but I think as the person responsible for the SEND service within children and families, that deep commitment is absolutely in my DNA and therefore in my services DNA, and there will be a positive contagion of what I hope will be a really hopeful message that stems from both myself and Julie and our deep commitment to co-production. I met with the Parent Care Forum yesterday, and we're planning an event before the summer where we will be inviting parents and carers from across the city to come in and tell us again to help inform our self-evaluation, which is the starting point for any improvement journey around inspection. So that's going to be what I hope will be a really exciting event. We've also got the oversight group that I spoke about last time, where Parent Care Forum members are part of that. So they will be holding us to account in real time around our delivery of the plan that comes out of the PwC work. So they're just a couple of examples of where that commitment is real. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back on the point that Councillor Flynn again helpfully referenced in relation to the digital app, and I think again that's a really important point. In terms of accessibility, and us not making assumptions that people do have access to things that they may not. But this is, I suppose, it's about a menu. It's about options and ensuring that we can maximise every option. In terms of digitalisation, there's something about reducing bureaucracy, and again, families have told us, education, colleagues in the city have told us, other partners have told us that they're feeding in information, sharing information in relation to individual children on multiple occasions. So there's something about, looking to digitalisation, but also looking at other options and other means where we can reduce bureaucracy, have children and families and other partners share information once, and how we can also have access to that as a partnership. But most importantly, that children and young people and parents and carers can have access to their own information. Digitalisation is one aspect of that, but you're absolutely right that we need to ensure that we're taking an inclusive approach to that, thinking about everybody in the city.
Thank you. So it was remiss of me not to mention this before, but can welcome Heather Jafar, who is here today, actually from Leeds Parents and Carers Forum. I think it is really noteworthy that, even though the key purpose of today is not to hear new evidence, not to hear new witnesses, but that the forum have made sure that they have someone here to be here to watch what we're doing in relation to this report speaks volumes of their commitment. And Heather, thank you, and thanks to everybody from the Leeds Parents and Carers Forum for all the evidence and their input into what we have before us today. It's been incredibly helpful and powerful, as Councillor Gruen said. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Heather. It's good to see you here. I think, Councillor Flynn, your point about accessibility is important. I mean, most of the parents in my wards who've come to me have the feedback I've tended to get is that digital would be a better way forward. However, I think it's a reasonable point to give people the option so that there is the feeling that this is centred on the needs of the parents and not the needs of the process. So I think it's a reasonable challenge you've made, and Julie, I acknowledge what you said as well. I mean, I think what would also be helpful to acknowledges that there will be, and we have talked about this, but just to make sure that the process as well, when we're trying to make it so that it's parents and carer and children and young people centred, recognising that there will be some people who need support with that. It might be due to language needs. There might be different reasons why people need support with that. So I think I think a lot of the spirit of this is very clear, but I think to just emphasise that point that as much as possible it needs to be parent and carer centred, and that some people will need additional support. I think it is better in general for it to be digital because it's also easier for people to access it, and also to welcome what was said around improved casework processes. I think all of us want to see improvements in this area, and I think the proposals here will help us as well when it comes to communicating with our residents and making sure that they feel supported in that process. People often come to us when they've tried other options or when they've run out of better ideas, and I think it's I think it allows us to support the process, but also to support those parents better. So those are two things that I would strongly support, and thank you everyone for your work on it.
Thank you. Councillor Rodri.
Thank you, Chair. It's obviously an enormous amount of work has gone into this, and having read it, I think it's a really good report. There's one figure that I wonder if I could have a bit of context on, please. In recommendation 1, there's a reference to a completion rate of 9.5%, and I'm just wondering what the context of that is. Is that 9.55% of cases completed within the statutory target period of 20 weeks, or is there something else behind this? If that's the case, then clearly there's quite a long journey to be on through ahead of us, isn't there? Thank you.
You're quite right, there is a long journey, but I'll let Dan answer that more fully, but fairly briefly, if you could.
Yeah, it's a very short answer, and it is that period, and yes, we do have a long way to go. I'm really convinced that we've got the right plan and structures in place to be able to change that quite quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Dan. Just I won't hammer the point. It's just that we've been talking about sorry, I've got a problem this morning, and I'm really struggling. So it's the strategic sort of element of this I've got no problem with. No one could argue with what you're trying to do. And I don't know about the last couple of years. I know that the people or the kids going on to these plans have increased exponentially since the Children's Act in 2014. And I have no problems about the communication of the strategic sort of element of it, whatever. But it's individual families too. You know, most of the queries I got were from people who've just entered the system and basically just didn't know what was going to happen next. And it was quite often the case, because of the pressure that SENSAP were under, that they weren't kept up to date with where they were in the sort of system, as it were. So it's not just the strategic level I would like the communications to be at, but at the lowest level too. And I do apologise for my strutting at the start. I'll keep quiet now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's something we've been really keen to tackle is almost the culture of this as well, where I think families have felt it's a battle to get an EHCP, which is absolutely something we don't want. We want it to feel like we're supporting them through the process. But you're absolutely right. You know, it's been overwhelming, quite frankly, how many more children have been requiring these plans. You can see in point 1, you know, we've more than doubled, almost tripled the number delivered in 23 compared to 22, and still struggling. And I think that really gets across how difficult it's been from our side. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. We need to be putting the family first. We need to be putting the young people at the heart of it, so it isn't that battle. And yeah, absolutely, that's a key thing we've been looking to address.
Just briefly, I suppose I'm just reminded of the conversation that we had last time at Scrutiny in terms of process driving practice, I think is the wording that we landed on at the end of a really good, rich discussion. And it's that point, Councillor Flynn, you know, that we need to ensure that our processes are not there for process sake. you know, that our processes are not becoming barriers actually to children and families. And so part of the work that we're doing as we go into the improvement plan is about communication, is about timely feedback to parents and carers, about decision-making processes, about where their child is, you know, within that decision-making process and within that 20-week, if you like, timescale. So again, you know, it's a point that we are very, very, very well focused on, and it's a priority for us.
If I may, because I completely agree with everything that's been said, and we will absolutely do everything we can to make sure that our approach is person-centred first. I really want to make the point though, because we keep talking about the team. The SENSAP team is one of the teams probably that is open to the greatest level of challenge and pressure within the authority. And it's important in this public meeting that I acknowledge the amount of work and effort and challenge that goes in through that team every day. We know that we can and will be better, but it's important that over the course of this work, and certainly over the last few years, that team isn't vilified. And I think we're in danger of some really, really good colleagues feeling as though the finger of blame is pointing at them. And it's really important that we take this forward in a really restorative way with all of our colleagues and teams to make sure that we enable them to get the best out of themselves for the good of the children and families that we're talking about.
Kate.
Thank you. Yeah, I welcome the recommendations, and I also obviously completely welcome the commitment from senior leadership team. And actually it's helpful what's just been said about the team itself, because I was sitting here thinking about putting yourself in the shoes of the parents and the carers and the children, but also putting yourself in the shoes of the staff that actually work on the ground, and looking at trying to build, how do we build bridges? And obviously that communication plan is really key to that. But obviously ultimately the local authority does have a statutory duty and a limited purse. And so it's about, I think as well, education for parents and carers around understanding the limitations, around managing expectations as well, working together, and also obviously some basic sort of customer service things that probably when people are busy and under pressure do tend to be overlooked. I think it's drawing all of those things together, isn't it, as a way of improving the service and improving the relationship between parents and carers and the individual staff working on the ground, and ensuring that the process can be as smooth as it possibly can, and without it feeling like a battleground, and reaching a more acrimonious sort of level of communication, which is obviously not conducive to ultimately trying to find a resolution that meets the needs of the children. So I think everything that you're saying is really helpful and encouraging, and hopefully we'll be able to see the benefits of that in time once these strategies are sort of put into place on the ground. But yeah, thank you very much for the commitment and the effort, because we can see that that's, you know, been a lot of work.
Thank you for that. Helen.
So, you know, I welcome the report, and I think it's a really good report. And it's great to hear what everybody's saying today, and the focus on children and the processes being there for the children and for improvement, not for the sake of it. But I've just got a question. As somebody who goes into schools, and this is particularly high schools I'm thinking of, I know that there are schools where there are huge issues with pupils there that are not in the best place for them. They're waiting for places. The school haven't got the resources, including the people, to support these children. So these children are at times being excluded or suspended, and then they're coming back and there's nothing new for them. The schools know what's needed. The heads really know what's needed, and they desperately want to do the right thing. They don't want to permanently exclude these pupils, because where will they be then? And then there's also not only the impact on those children, many of whom I think have behaviour and mental health problems, but then it's the impact on the rest of the school, the impact on the staff, who are just absolutely struggling to meet the needs of these children, because their behaviour is the message that they give when they're not being supported and they're not in the right place. And so that's incredibly difficult for teachers who have classes to teach. And they're saying to me that it's a real struggle to deliver the curriculum in these circumstances. So are there some pupils in mainstream schools and there just aren't the places for them at this time? I'm just wondering what the situation actually is.
So I think you're absolutely right that, and certainly it's the same message that I hear when I go into schools regularly at the moment as well, that people are struggling. I hear the word crisis used a lot. That's about staffing, retention, sickness, and the manifestation of that experience translating into people voting with their feet because it's such a struggle. There will always be, even when you get everything right, a level of challenge and concern within schools because lots of people are in them and people are complicated. But I think what we need to do is to try to make sure that we have in the city the right level of provision so that the children with a certain type of needs can access the right sort of provision. And at the moment, it's probably true that mainstream schools are probably slightly more under pressure than they need to be, and we need to work on developing provision of a specialist nature. Some of that will be partnerships and working with our mainstream schools. Some of that will be in the form of new or reconditioned specialist provision across the city. And that's a strategic plan that we need to develop and implement. We're looking at that right now for this September, but we need to have a much longer term plan around that. Once we've got that in place, it will still be hard, but it'll be less difficult because we know that there will be more places available of the right specialism to meet the needs of some of the children that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll just come in briefly. I think for me it goes back to, we're talking about the imperative of us working with children, young people, parents and carers in delivering and developing our services. And it's exactly the same for our relationships with schools, so it's not about the local authority, I suppose, doing too, or knowing best. And I know that a lot of the conversations that I've had over the last year, and I know, the conversations that Dan is having now with our school leaders across the city, is that collaborative approach, that coming together of minds, of ideas. Dan's used the word crisis. We are in, challenging times. Times that we, as professionals, we've never really experienced before. So we're coming together and to have those conversations, to share ideas. I think the other thing for me is around the wider partnership, so certainly I'm having conversations at the moment with our ICB colleagues, about the need, I suppose, to focus on early intervention and prevention, and to wrap ourselves around our schools. So when I'm in schools, I hear about schools, school staff, school colleagues really being challenged in terms of to meet the needs of children who do have neurodiversity, children who do have ADHD, children who perhaps on top of that do have additional mental health needs, might have learning disabilities. So there's something about how do we work as a partnership, as a system, with health colleagues in particular, to identify in a really timely way where children may have, additional needs, and where we can assess those needs and then respond to those needs as early as we possibly can. Because really, ultimately, what we would all want, I think, in this city is for children and young people not to need an educational health and care plan, because actually they're getting the support and the need that from the system at the earliest point in order to avoid the need for that more sort of statutory intervention. So I think there's very much something about how we as a local authority are engaging in that discussion with schools, about the solutions and trying to be creative and flexible, but also how we're engaging with the wider partnership around early intervention and prevention, because that's got to be the focus.
I know we're pressed for time. I just wanted to share, because this is we're talking about a really difficult situation, but it's not right to finish this conversation without flagging some of the really amazing and positive things that are happening in schools across the city. I was at the West Silk earlier this week, and I saw absolutely nationally groundbreakingly successful practice for children with additional needs being so well prepared for employment. Proper, meaningful, paid employment. We've got a young person in the city who had an EHCP at school, who's gone to university and got a degree. So there are some really good bits of practice that we need to share and disseminate.
Very briefly, I'm just conscious that we've allowed. Sorry, I just say, and then I'm going to bring Caroline in, who's indicated as the last contribution. So, Helen, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there are great things going on, and it's great to have the communication that we now have, that we have with you as a new member of staff in Leeds, Dan. But just to say, it would be really helpful, I think, to head teachers in schools that are waiting for places. If there was, because I'm getting the impression, and it might be different in different schools because I don't go into every school, but I'm getting the impression that it's just kind of, they're just there and they don't know when or where these pupils will go. So I think it'd be helpful for them to know and to have that communication. Thank you.
Caroline.
Well, I know this discussion is about children with additional special or particular types of need, but I do think there's a broader point to be made, and I have made it on a previous occasion on this scrutiny board. I really think, thinking particularly, Helen, about your point on secondary schools, I actually think the national curriculum isn't fit for purpose because it's not child friendly. So we now have a group of children who actually haven't got additional needs. They're just modern children. And the traditional diet that we give them in secondary schools isn't suiting their needs. And that's what's causing the pressure and the crisis, because not only do we have a group of children who need to be specially catered for, but we have a perfectly average group of children who are creaking at the edges because it doesn't fit, and it's not their learning mode. So I do think we need to review the secondary curriculum, well, all of the curriculum, actually, the national curriculum, and make it a bit more fit for purpose. I don't know how we go about doing that, but it's feeling very wrong at the minute.
Thank you for that, Councillor Green. That may indeed be something that we can look at as a board, as a substantive piece of work next year. Obviously, I don't deign to presume who will be sitting in this chair or indeed what the board may wish to look at next year, but that would certainly be something that I think would be a very positive piece of work. Obviously, there are challenges around freedom of what schools deliver, but I think there's something to look at there. No one else has indicated, which is helpful because I'm looking at the clock. Turn to the recommendations. There are two. That we agree the inquiry report as set out in the report. That we agree the inquiry report on the provision of EHCP support in Leeds, following consideration of this issue throughout the year, and a draft report at the board's March meeting. And secondly, that we agree, in line with recommendation 11, ongoing check and challenge should be recommended as a work item to our successor board in the 24-25 municipal year. Are we content to approve both of those? Yes, thank you. Colleagues, as members, at the beginning of this year, we recognised that it was increasingly clear that parents and carers accessing EHC support were having major difficulty in securing the outcomes they wanted and needed for their children. And what they told us was that they faced frustration, anxiety, and at a time when they were feeling the most vulnerable and needed the most support, they didn't feel they had anywhere to turn. Hopefully, this report, its recommendations and its actions will be part of the improvement, and we look to the Directorate to make sure that they take these on board and move with them at pace. And I'm sure this board will very much look forward to having reports over the next municipal year of how that rapid progress has actually taken place and the impact it's had on parents, carers, but actually most importantly, the young people in this city who desperately need that support in its most robust form. So thank you, colleagues, for that. And we shall move now on to item 8. Rob.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report on co-opted members seeks to bring together or respond to really comments during the municipal year from the Chair and board members around how the board assigns its co-opted members. So I've tried to cover the situation as is, and specifically to respond to two areas. One around having an SEND specialism, for want of a way of putting it, or someone with it from that background on the board. There are two options presented as to how the board might consider that and bring that forward for the next municipal year. And then secondly, which is covered largely by recommendation C, that refers to how we could more formally seek to get the views of children and young people as part of our work programme. Again, responding to member comments to that effect. So in summary, Chair, that presents the report. I think obviously open to comments in the usual way.
Thank you. My understanding is that based on what members have indicated through the year, that option one would be that substantive, essentially somebody like a group like the Leeds Parents and Carers Forum, in a substantive way being part of this board. And that, indeed, picking up what Councillor Flynn literally on his very first meeting for some time said, we need to make sure we have that voice, and that was where that came from, and hopefully reflects what the board has been seeking during the course of the year. Colleagues, I open it up to you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you. We discussed this briefly last time, didn't we? I think it's probably an opportunity to really look at what the constitution of the board is and the work we're doing, and how we can add weight to that. And if you think back to the work we've done the last few years, it's been really, really heavily focused around children's social care. So I think I agree entirely with the suggestion that we need to have someone from the SEND arena, and I think the suggestion of having somebody from the Leeds Parent Carer Forum on is something we all, I think, previously agreed with. So I don't think there's any dispute there, and presumably that would come under a co-opted non-voting member where there is a vacancy. There are two other further points I think where we could strengthen further. Is one, we do have the option to appoint another parent governor. There's currently a primary and secondary. We can co-opt up to 3. And I would propose that we seek to co-opt a parent governor from a special school in the city to capture that element as well. That would, I think, give us an alternative angle to the conversations we're having. I'm thinking about the work we have done previously. I have mentioned this before. Hopefully this is the time when we can rectify it. There is a deficit of staff representation in the social care side. We have 2 reps from teaching staff, but nobody from representing social carers in the city. And I think this is a good opportunity as we look to the year ahead to rectify that and address that imbalance, if you will, to make sure that we hear the voices of, as Dan was saying earlier, people who are actually on the ground delivering a lot of this, because I think that voice would be really crucial for us. There's a complication looking at the regulations in that we can't co-opt an employee of the local authority, but what we can do is have somebody from who's paid for the trade unions, for example, as we've had come in and represent and be a member of the panel. So with a slight amendment, Chair, I think I'd probably seek views first of all around those 2 points of a further parent governor from a specialist school, and then also a staff representative from children's social care.
So is that? So I'm not 100% sure what you're asking for. So I want to be. I'm sure colleagues are brighter than me. But so are you looking for 3? Because we've got. I'm trying to work out where the spaces come from. Yeah, please.
So the proposal would be we co-opt a non-voting member from the Parent Carer Forum, which would effectively create the position, fill the position created by Jackie Ward's retirement.
So that's the option one that we've got here. Yeah.
And then we currently, within our regulations, we can appoint up to 3 parent governor representatives. At present, we've only chosen to do 2, although there's a vacancy in secondary. So the proposal there would be that we use our right within the Constitution to appoint a 3rd parent governor and ask that that is from a special school, but a parent governor from a special school. And then I guess the difficult conversation for us to have is if we feel that there is benefit to having staff representatives from the larger side of the directorate that we all deal with, which is social care, then we'd need to look at where we can create that space within the non-co-opted members, non-voting members, in order to provide that parity. That's my suggestion. In response, if I think I saw some people saying we don't need the voice of staff reps, I would be interested to hear what the rationale is, and I support the rationale of having staff representatives from teaching. And I believe in that rationale, which is why I think it also applies to social carers as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. So what I would like to do is I'd like to tackle number 1 and number 2 of that first, and then we'll come on to number 3 last, if that's okay. So for the moment, can we just focus on the option 1 piece, or whether we want to have at least parent forum, parent carer, I knew I swapped something around there, parent carer forum representative on the panel, number 1. And then can we also look at the suggestion of having another parent governor specifically from one of the specialist provisions? So if we can take those 2 first, and then we'll have we'll do that debate first and deal with that, and then we'll come on to that number 3 part. Does that sound like a plan? I'm pleased you're nodding, because that's what we're doing. Good. So let's focus on those bits first. Comments, thoughts?
Just to clarify that I'm a school staff representative, so it's not the care sector, but it's also support staff as well.
Yeah,
as well as teaching.
That's fine, but let's please let's just stick to the bit we're talking about. Yeah, Jules.
Yeah, recommendations 1 and 2, I would support. So a representative from the parent carer forum and a 3rd parent governor, then yes.
May speak there. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? Are we all happy to move forward with that? Fine. Perfect. Right. Now, strap yourselves in. Right. Let's now look at this this third suggestion, whether we now would want to look at. So, Councillor Stevens, just give us maybe a bit more on that.
To be clear, it's very uncontroversial in the sense of, and it may be that we need to look at creating additional spaces, but the principle being we have as a board historically and as a council agreed that it's really important that we have the voice of staff representatives on this panel, and cross-party and everywhere else we would recognise that we might disagree on some points, but the value that brings to us in our conversations we've had has been exceptionally valuable. Therefore, we have a deficit because we don't have staff representative voice from people who are on the ground delivering things like EHCP support, etc., which has been the bulk of this board's work for 2 years now. We only really look at education side when we're looking at results, progress, and then the impact that all the other things are having in school. So if we believe we need staff representatives from the education side, therefore it goes hand in hand surely that we also need staff representation from the other side, would be the argument I would put forward, Chair.
I think what Councillor Stevenson's suggesting makes eminent sense. The one concern I would have is that I actually think the provision where you get somebody from junior schools and somebody from senior school representative, we also need. But as I understand it, we can only have 2 staff representatives. Is there any way at all that we could deliver on this? Might change it, getting the rules changed or whatever.
Thanks, Councillor Blackman. Yeah, I think I would have to take that away. I couldn't answer that in terms of expanding the number of non-voting co-optees. There are, as it sets out in the report, actually other avenues. So you could co-opt additional people for specific inquiries. There are up to 2 allowed of them, or indeed, actually, you could simply ask someone of that nature that Councillor Stevenson set out to attend as a witness for specific items. It would be obviously different to what you're proposing, but that is an option open to the board to get that sort of the front line position. If it is a case of expanding the provision of non-voting, I think I'd have to take that away and seek legal advice on it.
Councillor Hesselwood.
Yeah, I am not comfortable with this at all, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this is not comparable to any teacher representatives because teachers are not employed by the council. Due to the last 14 years of the fragmentation of the education system in this country, we have various employers within the education sector, and teachers are not employed by the local authority. Now, if we have somebody on this panel who is a direct employee of the council, then that becomes a big conflict of interest. Hang on, Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, but you won't tell me to hang on if that's all the same. I don't think that's what was said. In fact, Councillor Stevenson expressly said not that.
Okay, well, I've got more points.
No,
do you want me to come in or me to continue?
No, please continue.
Okay. So no other scrutiny board either has any staff representatives on it. So I don't understand why we're saying a directly employed member of staff of the council needs to be here.
I make a point of order, Chair. Personal explanation, 16.4. I did make clear at the point that the regulations set out very clearly that you cannot have an employed member of the council sitting on this board. I also added that it is entirely possible to have somebody who is representative of those staff, i.e. trade union representative, which you'll know all too well, to be represented on here in the same way as our representatives at present aren't directly employed by the authority. They are employed presumably by the trade unions that they represent their members here. That was the point that I made, that it is possible, Chair, to have a representative of the trade union here who represent staff workers who are not employed by the council.
Yeah, Jules, I'm not going to stop you speaking. Let's everybody dial it back 3. Everybody is going to get the chance to speak. Look back over the year. I don't think I've stopped anybody speaking at any point, but I'm actually A, trying to understand exactly what we're being asked, and B, trying to understand if we're able to mechanically deliver it. So, right, Jules, come back in.
Right. The representatives you're speaking about are not employed by the trade unions. They're employed by Leeds City Council. The conveners that the council has are employed by the council and seconded to the union. We don't have any other trade union representatives on any other scrutiny boards, if that's what you're saying, Councillor Stevenson. We have mechanisms set up within this council to deal with trade unions and staffing issues, and for staff to put their thoughts forward, to air any concerns they have through the relevant mechanisms that we already have set up. We have the JCCs, we have the education JCC, the corporate JCC, and others. So if you're talking about a trade union representative, then they would sit on those panels, not on this one. That is the way staffing issues have always been dealt with, and the way any evidence that staff have always been dealt with through those mechanisms. So trade union representatives, conveners, of this council are still employed by the council. They have a substantive position back in the council. So if Councillor Stevenson is saying that it's an employee of a trade union, as I am 2.5 days a week, that is something completely different. And also one final point that I've got, that if Councillor Stevenson is so supportive of the trade unions, I would ask the opposition to stop putting their amendment.
Yeah, I had to close your microphone because you, I'm afraid, I think you know that was entirely out of order. Jules, I think you know that what you said was beyond the pale of what we can say at this meeting at this time. I'll give you a moment because what you just said was entirely unfair to me, and I think you know it was. All right. Okay, that's a matter for you. Helen. You didn't want to go, so you read. Okay. Rob, can you come in on the procedure? Thank you.
So just to come back in a bit more detail on if there were to be any changes to what the board can do in terms of the co-optees, it's set out in the procedural 6 to 10, as I'm sure Councillor Stevens has seen. That would need to go to General Purposes Committee if that were to be changed, just to clarify that.
Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, just to come back on a few points.
I am going to caution you the same way as
I'm tightly considering, Chair, where I respond. I appreciate that. I respect your view. The starting point of this, as I stressed, is we have acknowledged on this board there is value in having staff representatives. And that's been the case that we've had historically. We've done a hell of a lot of work in the last 2 years on children's social care. And what's clearly been missing in some of that conversation, arguably as highlighted by Dan earlier, is the voice we haven't heard from, so Dan Barton earlier, was that there are people who have to go out and deliver what we are scrutinising and asking for. And it would have been useful to have that voice at the table, is my argument. And a mechanism to do that is to have a staff representative here. And on the point that was made earlier, I believe, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, that we are correctly constituted as a scrutiny board in that the staff representatives we currently have are not employees of the authority. And therefore, I propose that we pick that up in the same form and add an additional staff representative representing frontline social workers in the same way who would not be an employee of the council. In terms of the mechanism to deliver that, there's obviously 2 options. We currently have the Constitution sets 5 places that we can fill. We have decided to fill them with 2 staff reps, Young Lives Leeds, Kate Blacker, and the Parent Carer Forum now. So if we were to agree that there is a place to have a place on this panel to have the voice of those who are on the front line, we would then have to make the decision to either stick with 5 and change them, or make a formal recommendation to the annual council meeting to change scrutiny board procedure rules to allow us to co-opt 6 instead of 5 representatives. That would be the procedure we move forward. My preference would be the latter, but that would be answer the procedural questions that was asked, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to note that and the phrase staff representatives, I don't think is hugely helpful, respectfully. And I say that because they're not staff representatives, they're teacher representatives. Sorry, but the point I was making is they are mandated by law. No? No? Okay, I thought they were. Okay, I'm talking nonsense. I'm going to bring it Helen, then Councillor Venner, then Councillor Hesselwood.
The reason I made my point before that I'm just not a teacher representative, because I think it is important I'm a representative that is a teacher and of a union that represents teachers and support staff, but I'm here not to represent their interests. I'm here because of this is what my understanding of what I can bring to the table in terms of children and families. So as I say, I just wanted to clarify that. And I think it is important to know, because I think I was dismissed slightly before, but I think it is important to know that what our background is when we come as staff representatives. Because also because support staff would not want me as a school representative to be just classed as somebody who represents teachers. I represent support staff as well.
The full range. And I didn't, if it sounded like, if you meaning I dismissed you before, I was trying to make sure we focused on the right bit of the conversation at the right time. So if apologies if it felt like I was cutting you short, I was trying to make sure we focused on the right bit of the agenda at the right time. Councillor Venner and then Councillor Hesselwood.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My point follows quite neatly from the point both you've made and Helen's made, that I would agree with you that referring to staff representation isn't helpful, and Helen's just articulated that whilst she's here as a teacher, she's not here as a teacher representative, and also she's here with the experience of a wider group of school staff than just teachers. But Helen's just made the point she's not here as a teacher representative. As Councillor Hessel said, no scrutiny board in the council has either staff representation or trade unions attending to represent the voices of those staff. And as Councillor Hessel said, they would still be employees of the council. As Councillor Hessel said, we do have mechanisms by which, as an administration, we relate to our staff, we relate to our trade unions. And also, you do have, every time this board meets, you have the social worker voice here. Julie and Farah are social workers. So are almost all the staff who come before you from the social care side of the directorate, in the same way that staff who come from the education side are usually from a teaching background. It's arguably, and also you can request staff to come before the board whenever you want to get the voice of staff working in different parts of the directorate. You've had people here from early help, you've had people here from youth services, you've had people here from across health and the council and third sector who work in mental health. You can request people come to this board, but it's not the role of people who either work for the council or represent workers of the council to scrutinise the directorate, which is the role of this board. However, you can get the voice of frontline staff to come and present to you as needed with the inquiries that you're undertaking. Thank you.
As indeed we do. And of course, I think it's equally important to point out, we have the director and deputy director who are literally the voice of their directorates, which are the coal face, so to speak. Well, yes. And we can bring as deep into the directorate as we feel per item is necessary. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hesselwood and then Councillor Stevenson, you wanted to come back. Did someone else indicate? Sorry. So we'll go, right, got it.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Councillor Stevenson has acknowledged that we can't have any directly employed staff representatives on this board. Hence, we've already discussed education staff. So how does he plan? What are his recommendations for this person that he wants to come here as this representative? Because our staff, social worker staff, are directly employed by us, and I've already pointed out that he's mentioned trade unions, but I've already pointed out that the trade union conveners are directly employed by the council, and they have a substantive post with Leeds City Council. Should they no longer be a convener, then they are paid by Leeds City Council, and that's what determines their employment. So I have a question as to where this person is coming from, a very genuine question as to where this person's coming from.
We only have genuine questions here. Councillor Stevenson, you can answer that question should you choose, and then you were in next anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think if we, the next stage on this, if we were to decide that's what this board wanted, would clearly to be go out as we would with governors and and advertise the post as such and consult to find the individual to fill it. And I think if you had that consultation in the same way I've had that consultation, you informally, you would find that there are individuals that the relevant trade union can supply who isn't a trade union convener and isn't employed by this council and is employed by the relevant trade union, if that, which I agree with, is the body you want to represent them. The point I was going to make, Chair, as one step forward is, I never thought I'd be the one in this way round today, but at making the case. But I keep hearing that there's no other board, scrutiny board, that has a staff representative, and forgive me, we have decided to have a school staff representative from primary and from secondary, and what follows from that is the officers go to the NEU and ask for a representative to be sent here to fill that gap. With respect, you're here, Helen, because we've decided to have a staff representative. You're not here in your own right. We're here because we've asked for a representative, and you are the person who've said with the relevant experience to be here. So if no other scrutiny board has one, to play devil's advocate, then why don't we get rid of the representatives on this panel? I don't think we'd want to do that. So we recognise the value. All I'm suggesting is that we have the equivalent value given to us so we can properly consider with the relevant experience what we are doing on this board, and I've set out how we would deliver that. I'll leave it there, Chair. I know someone's come back, but I will move the point formally in a moment, if that's okay.
Councillor Mathern.
Thank you very much.
Just to reassure you, Councillor Heselwood, I can see your hand and I've written your name down. Fear not.
Thank you very much. I propose that we don't do as Councillor Stevens suggested, because following Councillor Heselwood's question about where this person would come from, I'm not certain that this person actually exists. You said that you would find them by putting an advert out for a trade union representative who isn't employed by the council but as Councillor Heselwood said, we don't think that they exist. Also, I think that your suggestion was disingenuous when you said that you valued having staff representatives, because what we see every budget is proposed.
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. You've made the point, and we are not going to start turning it into a party political argy-bargy. I have no problem with you making the point. You've made your valid point. But we are in the pre-election period, and we are not going to use this scrutiny board to advance party political points. You're making, I absolutely hear what you're saying, but please. You're welcome to if you can.
Okay. I understand your point that you don't want a political discussion. So why are we discussing this then? We weren't allowed to discuss a letter that has been sent, but we're allowed to. I'm lost. Sorry.
Well, we're discussing it because a member has made there's nothing party political about making a proposal, whether I agree with it or not. There's nothing party political about making a proposal that we have a social work representative on the panel. That's open, something that the panel can determine. I'd like to think we can determine that without the need to resort to party politics. I would have thought we could. I think we're more than capable of that. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Respectfully, Councillor Stevenson, I'm not convinced by the points you're making. I think when it comes to trade union representation, it is very important, and I'm pleased you agree with us on this. I do think that there are processes within the council which exist, and when you look at quite a number of other local authorities in different parts of the country, they don't all have those same processes, and I think there is real value to that. I'm not convinced, however, with the proposal that you've put forward. I think, and I'm treading carefully, as per your guidance, Chair, but I'm not convinced by this proposal. I think there are other mechanisms which can be followed. However, I'm also not convinced by the timing of it as well, given that within a few weeks the composition of this panel may change. So I don't see why this has been brought forward right now, especially given that we are in an election period, and as the chair has admonished us, we must tread carefully.
Believe me, they're not my rules. I think, in fairness to Councillor Stevenson, I think he's bringing it forward now because that's what we're talking about right now, the composition of the board and co-opted members. Helen.
I can see Councillor Ryan Stevenson's point that not to have somebody here representing a union or representing the people who pay into that union, but coming here like I do with the experience that I have in the field where I don't work any longer, but I am employed by, I'm not employed by the union. And just a little aside, I'm not employed by the council either. I was, but now my school was academised, so it depends. Employment can be with the council, it can be with the multi-academy trust if you're a representative for schools, but not representing the interests of school staff. But here, because you know about children and where they're being educated. So I can see that there could be a benefit of somebody of a similar level to myself within the structure where I work or worked and where I'm seconded from, bringing their experience, but not to represent their staff, to just bring their experience of those settings here.
So just so we're really clear on where we're going to bring in Councillor Hesselwood, I'm going to bring in Andrew, Councillor Stevenson, and that will be it. And I suspect sorry, I'm going to bring in you as well. But we need to bring this to a close fairly shortly, so we can keep the comments brief. Okay?
Yeah, I just need to come back on Councillor Stevenson's point. He has said that this person would be employed by a trade union, therefore that person would not be a staff representative. I know how this works because I've worked in the trade union movement for 30 years. 2.5 days a week, I am employed by a trade union as a senior trade union officer. And I am paid by that trade union and they are my employers. That is what Councillor Stevenson is proposing, I understand, because the conveners are paid by Leeds City Council. So by bringing that trade union officer in who is paid by a trade union, they are their employers in law, then they're not a staff representative, they're a trade union representative, and the trade union representatives attend the JCCs at the council, and that is the mechanism by which trade unions engage with the council. So this person, or this role, should I say, it's impossible to fill with the discussion that we're having, because Councillor Stevens is now saying that it should be a trade union representative. But unless they are employed by a trade union, they are going to be a member of staff at Leeds City Council. I've done this for 30 years, Councillor Coating. You're either a convener who is seconded out from Leeds City Council and you are a member of staff, or you are a full-time trade union officer who comes in to represent those staff. Okay? So if Councillor Stevenson is proposing that it is a full-time trade union officer that takes this role, then that is not a member of staff, is it? You said it should be a trade union officer,
right,
not a member of staff.
I think your point is well made. Yeah. No, you've had your say, sir.
Thanks, Chair. Seeing this going backwards and forwards like a game of tennis almost. I think the principle of having somebody in social care is very useful for the board. And I think it would be an idea if there's a way of finding out how to get somebody with that experience and knowledge to help the board would be ideal. If Councillor Stevenson's proposal means that that person doesn't exist, then by putting out an advert, there will be no response, there will be no position, there will be nothing lost. I'm not necessarily suggesting that that is the solution, but I think perhaps with our collective intellect, we can work out a way of trying to get somebody on the board that can provide that roundedness. Thank you, Chair.
We've got other people to bring in. Andrew.
Sorry, yeah, I was just, I guess, building on Helen's point, really. I mean, I can see the point that Councillor Stevenson makes, because I sit here representing the Diocese of Leeds. That is why I'm here. But realistically, I'm a serving head teacher in Leeds. And more that, you know, there are more than one of us, maybe more than three of us that have that teaching background around the table. So if a board member is saying, actually, could it bring benefit to have somebody with that social care background in whatever role that might exist, I can't see why we wouldn't be supportive of that. But I guess it's not an anomaly, but as somebody made the point earlier, I'm the employee of the governing body of what was an aided school and now an academy, still a serving head teacher, but not an employee of the city of Leeds, but still obviously bringing that experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll bring it to a conclusion. I intend to make a compromise motion. I think perhaps in an odd way, Councillor Heatherwood made my point for me. I don't think she quite realised it, but I think she did. In that, yes, I had made the assumption that a trade union would probably be the best outfit to represent that sector, and it can be done because, as Councillor Heatherwood just explained, not every body who works for a trade union is employed by the council. However, in terms of the compromise motion, taking feedback, I would like to move, Chair, that we pass a motion asking full council and the General Purposes Committee to expand council scrutiny board procedural rules to allow us to co-opt up to 6 co-opted members, and then that 6th to be filled by an individual with experience on frontline in social care. That doesn't have to be a trade union, but we can come back to it to find out how. But taking Andrew's point, Helen's point, and Councillor Down's point, that I'll withdraw the element of the trade union. Perhaps I incorrectly assumed that that was the best way to have the staff workers' voice around the table, given that's the precedent we have set. But if we're saying now that the staff representatives that we had are already co-opted aren't actually staff representatives, they're here in some other right, then we'll take that point. So the motion, Chair, would be that this board asks full council to allow us to co-opt up to 6, which would require a amendment to Scrutiny Board Procedural Rules 8.1, and that 6th non-voting co-optee should be filled with somebody with direct experience of frontline social care. And I'm looking to somebody to second my motion.
I tell you what, it's not often Scrutiny Board gets a vote on stuff. Woo! Get some early practice. Okay, so Councillor Stevenson has moved a motion. It's been seconded. Yeah, I'm going to let Rob come in.
Just obviously board members, council board members can vote on this item, but Tony and Andrew, because it's not an education matter, I don't think you have voting rights as a co-optee on this particular issue. It's an internal board matter. So just to clarify that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so there is a seconded motion before us that we will vote on in a moment, that we seek leave of council, that we approach council to amend the appropriate regulation so that we can have an additional co-opted member, and that if that were granted, that additional member be from a social work background, whatever the mechanism is to get them there. Okay, so that's the motion that's been seconded. All in favour? Okay, all against? Okay, that made that 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's lost. Thank you.
Thank you.
And can we note that that is the longest time we've ever spent discussing co-opted members, and so we've set another record there.
Back in June.
Right. That brings us then on to item 9, board end of year statements. If this lasts longer than the last item, I shall cry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the Children Family Scrutiny Board end of year statement. Each scrutiny board conducts one. Really, it's to complement the annual reporting process that takes place in July usually in July to full council. In it is a summary of the board's work and a statement from the chair, just trying to cover off our work in the 2023-24 municipal year. I think I'll leave it there, Chair.
Turn myself off. Members happy to note? Yeah. Comments, queries, observations? No, thank you. Move then on to item 10.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is the work programme, the last time that it comes before the board. Points to note really that are different from the usual consideration are, I have listed the items that we as a board thought that should be considered by the successor board, and they are included within the report, and that forms one of the recommendations to it. So just to note that slight difference. Within there as well are suggested dates for the next year, which we've covered off in the pre-meeting to some degree, but they are there as indicative dates for the next municipal year. Thank you, Chair.
Comments, anybody? Questions, observations? No? Okay. That then brings us to the date and time of the next meeting, which is obviously delicately carved on sandpaper at the moment, which is notionally the 12th of June, but very likely to change. I wish everybody well in the coming weeks. Quiet time, nothing much happening. I'm sure many of you will get plenty of steps in over the coming days. Thank everybody for your contributions, particularly members, officers, and particularly co-opted members too, who I know make an extra special effort to be here. It really is appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Meeting closed.